Most people lose an argument in the first 10 seconds. They beat around the bush, they miss the pitfalls, and they argue for what they want, not what their audience needs. Hi, I'm Shaunik. I'm a lawyer and a politician, so persuasion is literally my job. Here's how to argue and win on any topic against anyone. Number 1, don't bury the lead. If you don't start with your main point, you've already lost. The biggest and first mistake people make is that they approach argument like it's a novel. We're so used to storytelling arcs from books and TVs and movies, we like to gradually build to the point. That is not effective argument. See, between a storyteller and an audience, there is an implicit trust. The audience wants to believe, they want to engage, they want to be a part of the story, and they want to know the characters. But there is not the same trust between someone making an argument and that audience. When you're making an argument to somebody, you're arguing to a skeptic. It could be an adversary, it could be a third party, but either way, there is not that inherent trust that makes the other person want to believe what you're saying. Rather, they want to come at it from a position of skepticism. They want to poke holes, they want to push back. So you can't lead up in the same way you would if you were telling a story. Like if you're trying to convince your partner to get a dog, the temptation is to lead in softly because you're a little afraid of rejection. You don't want to come out swinging out the gate because you think they're going to push back. So you say something like, "Man, Jen's dog is so cute. I loved having a dog when I was a kid. I just remember it so fondly. Did you hear about the house that got broken into down the street? Man, I wonder if they had a dog. Dogs are great alarms." Your partner is just waiting for the other shoe to drop. And when they do, it doesn't matter what you said before. All that matters is what you say afterwards. So just start with that. "Hey, I think we should get a dog. I loved having a dog when I was a kid. And they're great guard animals. And we would having all these break-ins next door. It would be awesome. I'd feel so much safer and so much happier." You came out of the gate with your main point. You gave them 2 reasons that you're going to talk about. And now you have all that space to actually make the argument. And they are receptive to it in the sense that they know what you're trying to say. They're not waiting for another shoe to drop. They know exactly what you're going to say. And now you have the room to explain why and convince them. Jumping into your main point also lets you frame the argument on your own terms and not theirs. So you don't want to start by saying, "I know you think dogs are messy, but," because then you've already lost. You framed it on their terms and they're coming in already thinking about all the reasons to disagree with you. So before you go into an argument, spend some time thinking about what exactly your point is. A lot of times people go into arguments and they don't even know what their point is. They have some nebulous idea of what they want, but they don't have a concrete point to frame the entire argument. Take some time and think about it. Here's an exercise that can help you out. If there's something you're thinking about that you want to convince somebody else of, sit down and try and distill it down to 7 words. Can you make your point in 7 words? If you're having trouble, drop it in the comments below, and I'm happy to workshop it with you and see if we can get to some 7-word point that you can use. Number 2, build a foundation. If you break your argument into a series of small, undisputed facts or assumptions, so that no individual fact is itself disputable, then what you're doing is you're going step by step by step and building something that the other side can't back out of. Here's what I mean by that. I want a dog because it's a great deterrent from break-ins. There are a ton of steps in that sentence that I haven't broken down. Last week, there was a break-in down the street. That break-in was 3 houses away from our house. It seems likely that if there was a break-in 3 houses away from our house, it could have been our house that got broken into. That means that I am concerned and afraid that our house could get broken into. And in fact, it seems likely that it will get broken into if there's another break-in on this street. We don't currently have an alarm at our house. An alarm is important to deter break-ins because it sends a message to others around. It also makes a very loud noise to scare the burglars away because they're afraid of people being alerted. A dog makes a loud noise. A dog also growls, and that threat of growling and potentially biting similarly deters burglars away from coming into the house. I know that was painfully obvious, and I would never actually talk like that in a conversation about a dog, but here's why it's important. If you just say, "I want a dog because it's going to prevent these break-ins that have been happening," if the other person is thinking Chihuahua and you're thinking German Shepherd, then there is a disconnect because that person is thinking, "How the heck is a Chihuahua going to stop break-ins?" You have a disagreement, but you don't actually know where that disagreement is. It's just coming across like the other person's writing off your entire argument. They're not writing off your entire argument. They're writing off the very specific step in your argument, the assumption that was made that dogs growling deter burglars. Because a Chihuahua growling may not deter a burglar in the same way a German Shepherd growling would deter a burglar. But you're never going to find out exactly what point you're missing on unless you lay out each and every one of those points. If you do that, then there's an opportunity to realize that that is the step that you both are missing on. And it's a quick fix. And you say, oh, you were thinking Chihuahua? No, I'm thinking like a bigger guard type breed. And all of a sudden you're back on the same page again and you're making your way up the staircase of undisputed facts. Number 3, master the other side. Because if you can't make their best case for them, you're never going to be able to beat it. You've probably heard of a strawman argument. It's where somebody takes somebody else's side and makes a really weak version of that argument to dunk on. This is a Steelman argument. It's the opposite. You take the strongest version of an opposing argument and you use that to test your own argument against it. Here's the hard part, and it's a thing we fail universally when it comes to political discourse. You've got to respect the other side. You've got to see the validity in some of the points the other side is making, at least where they're coming from. Because if you don't, then you're never going to be able to give that Steelman argument the strength it needs to adequately test your own argument, to find your own weak points and your own gaps. I do this as a litigator all the time. Anytime I have an argument in court, the first thing I do to prep is I make the best version of the other side's argument. I make an argument that is better than the one they made to defeat my side. And then I test my argument against it. I find gaps and weaknesses every time I do it, because you're never actually going to be able to identify your own blind spots until you come at your argument from a totally different angle. Number 4 is know your audience. The best argument is the one that addresses a need that your audience has. First, you got to know who you're arguing to, because it isn't always the person who's making the other side of the argument. Say you're in like a group setting, you guys are deciding where to go for dinner. And one person is arguing that you should go get Japanese food, and you're saying you should go get Ethiopian food. The swing vote is the person you're arguing to. The person in the group who hasn't made up their mind yet, whose vote is going to put the majority over the edge. They're the audience. They're the person you're arguing to. So as much as the other person is going to make all of their arguments for going to get Japanese food, what you want to do is you want to identify that you are making that argument not to that person, because you're not going to change their mind, but to the swing vote who hasn't decided yet. Once you know who the audience is, you can tailor your argument to be really strategic with the points you're making. This friend is cost sensitive. You know that. So you emphasize that the Ethiopian place is half as expensive as the Japanese place. This friend doesn't like to try new foods. They like the foods that they're comfortable with. And you know they like Indian foods. So you focus in on the similarities between Ethiopian food and Indian food. The injera bread in Ethiopian food is very much like an Indian dosa. The spices are very similar. Then you think about how this person weights different metrics when it comes to decision making. Maybe they value Yelp reviews, in which case you pull up the Yelp review and say, hey, my place has a higher Yelp review. Maybe they really value the testimonial of a particular friend in the group. They trust their opinion. You say, hey, Walter really likes this Ethiopian place. You can tailor your argument based on how this person, how this audience member makes decisions. Number 5, emotion seals the deal. Logic and facts, they set up why this person can make the decision you want them to, but emotion tells them why they should. Now let's be clear, emotion should be used as a highlighter, not a Sharpie. Emotional rants are not effective arguments because they center totally on what you want, what you feel, and they get away from what the audience wants, what the audience values, what the audience needs. Instead, you've got to build an emotional connection with your audience. You're not telling them the emotion to feel, and you're not telling them the emotion you feel. You are giving them all the tools they need to develop an emotional connection to the argument you're making. It's 10 p.m. at night. Kids are in bed, you're reading a book, lights are all dim, and I'm not back from the city for another hour. And all of a sudden, the front doorknob starts jiggling. And you hear it, and you wait, and then it stops, and then it jiggles again harder. Now, I've already told them that one of my main points is we should get a dog because it'll stop break-ins. But the way I've now described the break-in and created a picture in their mind is creating an emotional connection with my argument. The payoff of a dog would bark and scare the person off now will come with some emotional relief because there's been some small emotional connection to the feeling of being alone at night and the door jiggling. Number 6, end with a clear ask. If this video was helpful or interesting, why don't you like it? Drop a comment below. Go watch some of my other videos. You might like them too. It's not enough to just be right or prove your point. You've got to have a clear ask to seal the deal. And that ask can be very different than the point you're trying to prove in the first place. Your point was, we should get a dog. But your ask can be something like, look, why don't we go down to the shelter this weekend and just look at the dogs, and maybe we can take one home for a couple hours just to see what it'll be like. You gotta remember that winning the argument doesn't mean getting everything you want in the 1 second after you finish talking. It's a gradual process. People need time and space to change their minds, especially if they're dug in on something. So you allow them that with a very tailored ask. You get a foot in the door, and then you let the argument you made sit and do its work. Okay, here's my real ask for you. Take these tips, go out and use them. And then report back. Tell me how it went, what worked, what didn't, and let's talk about it. See you next time.